You know, we're all a bit obsessed with success, right? We study the billionaires, the championship teams, the breakout startups, all hoping to find that one secret formula. But what if I told you that focusing only on the winners is one of the biggest mistakes you can make? It turns out the most important lessons, they often come from the ones who didn't make it.
To really get this, we need to jump in a time machine. We're going back to World War II, and there was this massive life-or-death puzzle that needed solving. Allied bombers were getting shot down at a terrifying rate. The engineers knew they had to add more armor, but the big question was, where? Their first answer seemed like perfect common sense, but it was completely dangerously wrong.
Okay, so here's what they did. They went over every single plane that managed to get back from a mission, and they carefully mapped out every last bullet hole. The data seemed crystal clear. So I'm going to ask you the same question they were wrestling with. You take a good look at this damage pattern. Where would you add the armor?
Well, the initial plan was probably exactly what you're thinking right now. The military command basically said, this is a no-brainer. Put more armor where we see all the holes. And on the surface, that makes perfect sense, right? You reinforce the parts that are obviously getting hit the most.
But then, a statistician named Abraham Wald stepped in. He looked at the exact same charts, the same data as everyone else, and he saw something they had all missed. He realized the most critical piece of information wasn't on the chart at all. The evidence they were using was fatally flawed.
And here it is, the brilliant, counterintuitive insight that changed everything. Wald pointed out that the military was only studying the survivors. Those bullet holes on the returning planes didn't show the plane's weaknesses, they actually showed its strengths. They showed where a plane could get shot up and still manage to limp back home. So the real weak spots? They were the clean areas, the places with no bullet holes at all, like the cockpit or the engines. Because any plane that got hit there, well, it never came back to be stuck.
This incredible moment of out-of-the-box thinking perfectly illustrates a really dangerous mental shortcut. It's a cognitive bias that affects all of us, every single day, far, far away from any battlefield.
It's called survivorship bias. It's our brain's natural habit of focusing on the people or things that survived a process, while we totally overlook the ones that didn't simply because they're not around for us to see anymore. We're learning from the planes that returned, but we're completely ignoring the lessons from the ones that crashed.
So why do our brains fall into this trap so easily? Well, think about it. Success is loud. It gets headlines, books, documentaries. It's celebrated and put on a pedestal. Failure, on the other hand, it's usually silent. It gets buried, forgotten, and just quietly disappears from view, leaving us with a really distorted picture of reality.
So what's the big deal? Why is this so dangerous? Well, because it leads to terrible decisions. It gives us this warped sense of how things work, creating false confidence and just wildly unrealistic expectations. We end up underestimating how risky something is because we're completely blind to the giant graveyard of failures that are just out of sight.
And this is not just a cool historical footnote. I promise you, once you learn to spot survivorship bias, you're going to start seeing it absolutely everywhere. In business, in career advice, in pretty much everything.
Let's just look at a few examples. What do we see? We see the story of the college dropout who became a billionaire. What don't we see? The thousands upon thousands who also dropped out and ended up with nothing. We see the investment funds that are crushing it. We don't see all the funds that failed and were just quietly erased from the records. We are constantly making choices based on this heavily filtered, incomplete data.
And this really is the heart of the problem. We're looking at just the tip of the iceberg, that one successful outcome, and we're trying to create a map from it as if it's the whole picture. We completely ignore the massive, hidden part underwater, the part made of luck, timing, and countless silent failures. And we fool ourselves into thinking success is just some simple, repeatable formula.
All right, so how do we fight this? How can we make better decisions? Well, the key isn't to stop learning from success. The key is to start actively looking for the evidence that has disappeared. It's about training yourself to see the full picture.
So, here's a simple toolkit you can use. First, just get in the habit of asking, what am I not seeing here? Who else tried this and failed? Second, go out of your way to study failure. Look at postmortems and failed projects. That's where the richest lessons are usually buried. Third, just be really skeptical of those one simple path to success stories. And finally, always factor in the huge roles that luck and context play.
It's so important to remember this. Success stories usually aren't dishonest. They're just incomplete. Think of them as the final edited version of a movie. They're a very selective cut of a much messier reality. To really understand the world, you have to go looking for all the scenes that ended up on the cutting room floor. So I'm going to leave you with this question to think about. Look at your own goals, the advice you follow, the people you admire. What visible survivors are shaping your decisions? And maybe more importantly, what invisible failures are you not seeing?